Welcome to the Trend Reddit channel. This is a place where we share interesting, humorous, and emotional stories about family life. Each episode will be a journey exploring familiar situations that anyone can encounter in their own family. Let's laugh, reflect, and sometimes shed tears together with these meaningful stories. A wealthy millionaire, yet his life is missing something precious: love and connection. With his vast fortune but no one worthy to inherit it, he decides to disguise himself as a beggar. Will he, in this new role, be able to find someone truly deserving of his legacy? The story begins here, where secrets and emotions are stirred, and everything is not as it seems. If you love relatable and touching stories, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of our videos. Please click the notification bell to get the latest updates on our new episodes. Thank you for your support and for being with us on this channel. Lucas White, a once ambitious and now aging millionaire, sat in his doctor's office, his usually composed demeanor cracked with apprehension. The sterile, quiet room seemed to echo the weight of the news he had just received. As his gaze settled on his faint reflection in the window, he felt his world narrow. His doctor's words echoed in his mind, firm yet edged with sorrow: "Lucas, the cancer has progressed too far. With aggressive treatment, you might have a year. Without it, well, just a few months." The diagnosis, stark and unyielding, felt like a curtain finally falling on the years Lucas had spent building his empire. He was, by most standards, an astonishing success. Owning real estate across multiple continents, businesses under his name in every major city, Lucas had accumulated a fortune that people only dreamed about. Yet, this life of luxury and endless influence now felt hollow. He had always known he couldn't have children, a reality he had come to terms with long ago. Yet now, without anyone to pass his legacy to, he was left questioning the purpose of his wealth. What good was this fortune if it ended with him, if he left nothing meaningful behind? As he pondered this, Lucas's thoughts drifted to an idea he had previously brushed aside. Over the years, he had often felt disillusioned by the greed he encountered, even within his inner circle. He wanted, more than anything, to find someone genuine, someone who would value kindness over wealth, honesty over ambition. Perhaps he could use the remainder of his time to find a worthy heir, someone who might carry forward his legacy, not in wealth, but in principle. Rejecting the doctor's suggestions for treatment, Lucas made up his mind. His wealth had shielded him from the hardships of the world, isolating him in a tower of comfort and excess. To truly understand people and their genuine character, he would need to shed his identity entirely. It was an impulsive decision, but it filled him with a strange energy. He would disguise himself as a beggar, living among the people, observing their behavior, and finding the one person who would embody the qualities he valued the most. In the following days, Lucas prepared for this transformation. His carefully tailored suits, polished shoes, and expensive accessories were tucked away, replaced by a set of worn-out clothes he had acquired from a charity store. He looked at himself in the mirror before he left his luxurious penthouse for the last time, taking in the sight of his weathered face, unkempt hair, and the faded clothing. Stripped of all outward signs of his wealth, he felt a mix of fear and liberation. With a single bag slung over his shoulder, Lucas left the life he had known for decades, stepping into the gritty reality of the city's streets. At first, he felt a sense of disconnection, like an actor playing a role, watching the world around him but remaining detached. But the city didn't care who he was or what he had achieved. Here, he was just another face in the crowd, just another unfortunate soul trying to survive. His once commanding presence faded into the background as he began to experience the streets, where kindness and cruelty could be found in equal measure. The first few days were filled with small revelations. Lucas observed the daily rhythms of the city's homeless community, how they found food, shared shelter, and supported each other in silent solidarity. He learned to navigate the unspoken rules of life on the streets, noticing how some people ignored him entirely, while others offered a sympathetic glance or a few coins without making eye contact. But there were also those who looked at him with disdain, as if his presence offended their sense of propriety. One rainy afternoon, he sat on a cold bench, watching the busy streets as passers-by hurried by, each lost in their own world. A young woman with a child hesitated as she approached him, her gaze softening as she dug into her purse and handed him a dollar bill. "Take care of yourself," she murmured, before hurrying off with her son. It was a small gesture, but it touched Lucas more deeply than he anticipated. He realized that his life of wealth had often shielded him from such genuine moments of human connection. Yet, the streets were not always kind. One evening, as he sat under an awning to escape a cold drizzle, a group of young men approached him, laughing and jeering. They taunted him, calling him names, and one of them kicked his makeshift bedroll aside. Lucas, too weak and weary to resist, felt the sting of their mockery and the pain of their careless kicks. They finally left, leaving him bruised and shaken. As he lay there in the darkness, he began to question his decision. Humanity's kindness, it seemed, was as fragile as its cruelty was relentless. But it was during one of these low moments that he encountered Ethan, a young boy with an unmistakable spark of courage. The boy had approached him one evening when the same group of troublemakers had returned. Ethan's small figure stood between Lucas and his assailants, his voice firm as he shouted, "Leave my father alone." His bravery surprised the men, who quickly retreated, laughing off their embarrassment but leaving Lucas untouched. As the group dispersed, Lucas looked at the boy in shock and gratitude. He couldn't understand why this child, a stranger, would risk himself to help a man he didn't even know. The boy's face, though youthful, was etched with resilience and kindness that was rare in the world Lucas knew. For the first time, he felt a sense of hope stir within him. Perhaps, he thought, he had finally found someone who would value compassion over wealth. In the days that followed, Lucas found himself growing close to Ethan, who began to visit him regularly, bringing scraps of food and a warmth that Lucas hadn't felt in years. Lucas learned that Ethan had faced his own share of struggles, living with his single mother, Ella, in a modest home nearby. Despite their limited means, they had an unbreakable bond, a genuine love that transcended material wealth. The boy's selflessness reminded Lucas of something he had lost along his path to fortune, and he found himself drawn to their humble, unassuming life. This connection, fragile but powerful, began to fill the void Lucas had carried for years. The wealth and luxury he had once prided himself on now seemed trivial in comparison to the quiet strength he saw in Ethan and Ella. As Lucas settled into his life on the streets, he began to see the world from a perspective he had never known. Days drifted into nights, and he found himself wandering the alleys and hidden corners, where life was both raw and real, and where pretenses held little value. The cold, indifferent faces of those passing by often reminded him of his past life, yet he could now feel a strange comfort in the honesty of this simplicity. It was during one of these aimless nights, as he sat quietly on a bench near the park, that a memory stirred within him, one that would soon bring a startling change. Lucas's encounter with Ethan had left a mark, a reminder of a truth he had pushed deep down in his pursuit of wealth. Ethan's compassion, his courage, and the strange attachment he had shown felt oddly familiar, yet Lucas couldn't place why it moved him so profoundly. The boy had come to see him as a father figure, even calling him father during their first encounter with those young men. Each time he repeated the word, Lucas felt a strange pang in his heart, a yearning he didn't understand. It was a part of him he had thought was closed forever, a sense of family, a legacy beyond wealth. But as Lucas learned more about Ethan and his mother, Ella, these sentiments only deepened. Ethan's selflessness, his small acts of kindness, and his unflinching loyalty seemed to echo traits Lucas had long forgotten in himself. The boy would bring him leftovers, telling him stories of his day with a gleam in his eyes that sparkled with hope, despite the hardships he and his mother faced daily. Each interaction reminded Lucas of the life he had missed, the family he had never had. One evening, as Lucas was resting beneath the awning of an abandoned storefront, Ella approached him. She looked much older than her years, burdened with the strains of single motherhood, yet her face held a warmth that softened her worn features. Her gaze, however, was cautious, as if harboring a truth she wasn't yet ready to reveal. She had come to see the man who had, in her son's words, been watching over Ethan and protecting him. Lucas was struck by her presence. She thanked him softly, her voice steady but tinged with something unspoken. "Ethan sees something in you," she said, eyes searching his face, perhaps trying to understand why her son had taken to a stranger with such fervor. Her words hung in the air, delicate yet full of meaning. Lucas felt compelled to share a bit about himself, revealing only fragments of his journey and how he'd found himself here, in search of an elusive purpose. To his surprise, Ella didn't pry. She simply nodded, acknowledging his words with quiet understanding. There was no judgment in her gaze, only a silent acceptance of the person he had become. She shared her story in return, speaking of her struggles to raise Ethan alone, of the sacrifices and the strength it required. In her presence, Lucas felt a connection that transcended wealth, status, or past choices. Here was someone who had lived a life of resilience and love, who had raised a child with values money could never buy. Days turned into weeks, and Lucas found himself drawn more and more to the warmth he felt around Ethan and Ella. He came to understand the bond between them, how it was forged not by wealth or privilege but by a deep, enduring love. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of belonging, a feeling he had never found in boardrooms or luxury hotels. Each day he spent with them filled him with a quiet joy he hadn't felt in years. But it was during a rare moment of vulnerability that everything changed. Lucas, still weakened from his time on the streets and his illness, collapsed one evening while walking to their usual meeting spot. His heart, already fragile, gave way to the strain, leaving him on the ground, gasping for breath. Ethan, who had been on his way to meet him, found him there and, with a strength that belied his age, managed to pull Lucas up and help him find shelter. In that moment, the weight of his own mortality hit Lucas with full force. Here was a young boy, whom he had come to care for deeply, risking himself without hesitation. Ethan's loyalty, his sheer courage, left Lucas stunned. He saw himself in the boy's actions, his resolve, his unwavering sense of right and wrong. He realized then that this was what he had been searching for, not a successor for his fortune, but someone who would inherit the values he had once held dear. As he regained his strength in Ella's modest home, surrounded by the warmth he had so long craved, Lucas couldn't ignore the overwhelming feeling of belonging. His disguise, his ruse of living as a beggar, felt irrelevant in their presence. Here, he was not Lucas White, the millionaire, he was simply Lucas, a man looking for connection and meaning in the last days of his life. But that night, as he lay resting in their small but cozy home, Ella approached him, her face etched with a quiet determination. She had a story to share, one that would change everything he thought he knew. Taking a seat beside him, she revealed a truth that left him speechless. Ethan, she said with a tremor in her voice, was his son. If you find it interesting, please like it. If not, please comment number 1. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. Lucas felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. His mind reeled with disbelief, his thoughts spiraling back to a time he had tried hard to forget. Years ago, he had been told he could never have children, a belief that had shaped the choices he made, the life he had lived. Yet here was the proof, standing before him in the form of a brave young boy who had shown him the kind of love he hadn't thought he could ever receive. Ella's words were a balm to his years of solitude and regret. She explained how she had chosen to keep this secret, believing he would never accept Ethan because of his diagnosis. Yet, despite her struggles, she had raised Ethan with love and kindness, instilling in him values Lucas could only admire. Now, faced with this revelation, Lucas felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. He had found his heir, not to his wealth, but to his heart. With this new knowledge, Lucas saw the world with renewed clarity. His life's work had finally taken on meaning, not through his empire but through the love and courage of the son he had unknowingly fathered. In that moment, he understood that he had been given a second chance, not to save his fortune, but to leave behind a legacy of love and integrity. Lucas's life took on a renewed sense of purpose after discovering the truth. Knowing that Ethan was his son, the boy he had come to admire for his kindness and courage, transformed everything. The world around him, previously cold and distant, felt vibrant, each moment charged with a meaning he had never expected to feel again. Lucas now understood that his legacy wasn't his wealth but rather the bond he had with his son, the family he had unknowingly yearned for all his life. Determined to make up for lost time, Lucas tried to integrate himself into Ethan's life more deeply, savoring the small, precious moments they shared. Every day, he'd walk with Ethan to school, their conversations rich with stories and laughter that softened the loneliness he had carried for years. The closeness between them grew effortlessly, a warmth blossoming in Lucas's heart that no amount of money or success had ever given him. As the days went by, he found a sense of peace in guiding Ethan, sharing bits of wisdom and advice he had learned from his years in business and life. Ella, too, became an integral part of this new chapter. She had shown immense strength, raising Ethan alone, teaching him values Lucas had come to treasure. Lucas marveled at her resilience and found himself respecting her more with each passing day. Though they hadn't spoken much of the past or the struggles she'd endured, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a silent acknowledgement of the life they might have had together had circumstances been different. Their quiet companionship brought him comfort, something he hadn't realized he needed. But the reality of Lucas's condition loomed over him, an ever-present reminder that this happiness, this newfound connection, was fragile. His health continued to decline despite the joy he felt around Ethan and Ella, and he often grew weak after even the smallest exertion. Determined not to worry them, he hid his worsening symptoms, fearing the impact his illness would have on the family he had only just found. He tried to remain strong for them, to savor every day, even as he felt his strength slipping away bit by bit. One evening, however, Lucas's health finally betrayed him in a way he couldn't conceal. As they sat together after dinner, talking and laughing in the cozy warmth of Ella's modest home, Lucas suddenly felt a sharp pain radiate through his chest. His vision blurred, and he reached out instinctively, his hand trembling as he grasped the edge of the table for support. Ethan, noticing his father's sudden change, was at his side in an instant, his small hands grasping Lucas's arm with a strength that surprised them both. The worry in Ethan's eyes was unmistakable, and Lucas felt a pang of guilt. He had hoped to spare them this fear, to keep his pain hidden until the very end. But now, he had no choice but to face the truth he had been avoiding. He looked at Ethan and Ella, their faces a mix of fear and love, and knew he could no longer keep this secret from them. Summoning the last of his strength, he confessed to them about his illness, the reason he had come to the streets, searching for purpose as his final days approached. Ella's reaction was immediate, her face etched with anguish as she listened. Ethan, however, seemed determined, his gaze fierce as he held Lucas's hand tightly. The boy refused to let his father give in to despair, speaking words of encouragement, insisting that they would get through this together. Despite his youth, Ethan's resilience gave Lucas a sense of peace, a certainty that his son would carry on even after he was gone. It was a comfort he hadn't expected, and in that moment, he felt grateful for the time he'd been given with them, however brief it might be. As Lucas lay recovering, Ella sat beside him, her face softening with a blend of understanding and resolve. She urged him to fight, to try for treatment, to extend the time they had together. Reluctant but unable to resist the hope in her voice, Lucas agreed to visit the doctor again, this time with Ethan and Ella at his side. The hospital was daunting, a stark reminder of the fragility of his health, but the presence of his newfound family gave him strength he hadn't felt before. During one of these hospital visits, however, an unexpected crisis struck. Ethan, who had been waiting with Ella in the hallway, suddenly collapsed, his small frame crumpling to the floor. Panic surged through Lucas as he rushed to his son's side, fear clawing at him with a force he hadn't felt even for his own illness. The doctors quickly intervened, and Lucas and Ella stood helplessly by, watching as their son was whisked away for urgent tests. The minutes stretched into hours as they waited, their hands clasped tightly together in silent support. Finally, a doctor approached them, his expression grave. Ethan, they explained, had a rare genetic condition, one that required a transplant to treat effectively. The news struck Lucas with a cruel irony. The boy who had become his salvation was now in dire need of help that only Lucas, perhaps, could provide. Desperate, Lucas volunteered to be tested as a potential donor, his heart pounding with hope and fear. The doctor warned him of the risks, especially given his own failing health, but Lucas's resolve was unshakable. He would do anything to save Ethan, even if it meant sacrificing his remaining strength. Ella pleaded with him to reconsider, tears in her eyes as she grasped his hand, but Lucas could see the understanding beneath her grief. She knew, as he did, that this was his final chance to give Ethan the future he deserved. After a tense wait, the tests confirmed that Lucas was indeed a compatible donor, though the operation would pose significant risks to his life. Without hesitation, he agreed to proceed, his decision firm. In his mind, there was no question, this was the legacy he wanted to leave, a gift not of money or possessions but of life itself. The doctors prepared him for the surgery, their faces grim but respectful of his choice. As Lucas was wheeled into the operating room, he looked back at Ella and Ethan, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. He held their image in his mind, drawing strength from their love, their presence, and the bond they had formed against all odds. In that moment, he felt a peace he had never known, a deep contentment that came not from the wealth he'd once cherished but from the knowledge that he was finally, truly, part of a family. Lucas lay on the hospital bed, his thoughts racing as the gravity of his decisions settled over him. The sterile, clinical environment contrasted sharply with the warmth he had found with Ethan and Ella, and he took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The surgical lights above glared down, casting harsh shadows that reminded him of the finite nature of his life. Yet, in the midst of these shadows, he felt a calm resolve. This was, in every sense, the culmination of his journey, a chance to give Ethan something far more precious than the fortune he had amassed. As the medical team prepared for the operation, he recalled every moment he'd shared with his son. Ethan's laughter, his resilience, and the fierce loyalty he had shown toward a man he once believed to be a stranger. Lucas understood now that love, not wealth, was his true legacy. In saving Ethan, he would leave behind a part of himself that would endure, a gift he had never expected to be able to give. The anesthesiologist leaned over, softly informing him it was time, and as Lucas closed his eyes, he felt a profound peace wash over him. His thoughts drifted to Ella's face, her quiet strength, the love and dedication she had poured into raising their son. He thought of Ethan, whose life now hung in the balance, and felt grateful that fate had given him the chance to be there for his family in their time of need. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, Ella sat alone, her hands tightly clasped together. The silence weighed heavily, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. She replayed the moments leading up to this day, the revelation of Lucas's illness, Ethan's sudden collapse, and the heart-wrenching decision Lucas had made. She knew the risks he was taking, understood the depth of his sacrifice, and it filled her with a mixture of awe and dread. Her mind grappled with the possibilities, the fear of losing him, yet she also felt an undeniable pride in Lucas, for he had chosen love and family above everything else. Hours passed, marked only by the rhythmic ticking of the clock and the occasional muffled footsteps of nurses and doctors moving through the corridor. Ella held on to hope, even as worry gnawed at her. She clung to the belief that Lucas's sacrifice would save their son, that the love they had all shared would carry them through this trial. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future, one where Lucas, Ethan, and she could finally be a family in every sense. Inside the operating room, the procedure was delicate and complex. Lucas's fragile condition posed a challenge, but his determination had bolstered the surgical team. They moved with precision and care, understanding the gravity of their task. The transplant was both a gift and a test, a moment that held the weight of lives intertwined by fate. Lucas's body, weakened by illness, fought through the surgery, his pulse steady, his vital signs monitored with unyielding focus. In another operating room, Ethan lay unconscious, surrounded by doctors and machines, oblivious to the life-changing act his father was performing for him. His small figure, so full of spirit in his waking hours, seemed vulnerable, yet there was a strength that radiated from him even in sleep. The same resilience Lucas had come to admire now manifested in this crucial moment, as father and son were bound by this extraordinary gift of life. After what felt like an eternity, the lead surgeon stepped out into the waiting room, his expression neutral yet tinged with relief. Ella rose to her feet, her heart pounding, bracing herself for the news. The surgeon informed her that both Lucas and Ethan had come through the surgeries successfully, though Lucas's recovery would be particularly delicate given his condition. he explained that while the worst was behind them, the path ahead would be challenging, requiring time, patience, and care. Ella's eyes filled with tears of gratitude and relief, her body sagging under the weight of emotions that had been held back for so long. She thanked the surgeon, her words trembling, and he offered her a small, reassuring smile before departing. Gathering herself, Ella moved to the recovery area, her heart beating with a mixture of hope and trepidation. She longed to see both Lucas and Ethan, to witness firsthand the miracle that had unfolded. In his hospital bed, Lucas slowly opened his eyes, blinking against the bright lights as he returned to consciousness. His body ached, each movement sending a wave of pain through him, but as his gaze settled, he found Ella standing beside him, her expression filled with relief and love. A gentle smile crossed his face, and he reached out weakly, his fingers curling around hers in a gesture that conveyed everything he couldn't say. She squeezed his hand in response, understanding the depth of his emotions without the need for words. "Ethan?" Lucas managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. Ella's face softened as she assured him that their son was safe, recovering well thanks to his father's gift. A quiet tear slipped down Lucas's cheek as he absorbed the news, his heart swelling with joy and gratitude. He had faced his own mortality, risking everything, and it had been worth it. The legacy he had yearned for was now a reality, embodied in the life of his son. When Lucas was strong enough, the doctors allowed him to see Ethan. The boy was still weak, his small body wrapped in blankets, but his eyes brightened when he saw his father enter the room. The two shared a look that spoke volumes, an unspoken understanding between them. Lucas sat beside him, gently brushing a hand over Ethan's forehead, marveling at the bond they now shared, not just as father and son, but as two souls bound by an act of love and sacrifice that would shape both their lives. "Thank you, Dad," Ethan whispered, his voice filled with a wisdom beyond his years. Lucas nodded, his heart too full for words, his mind too overwhelmed to process everything in that single moment. They didn't need elaborate expressions, their connection was evident in their silence, in the way their hands held tightly, refusing to let go. As the hours passed, Lucas and Ethan shared quiet conversations, each finding solace in the presence of the other. Their laughter and whispered words filled the sterile hospital room with warmth, creating a space where love had triumphed over despair, where hope had replaced fear. They both understood that life was fleeting, but in this moment, they had each other, and that was enough. Lucas's sacrifice had given Ethan a second chance at life, and in return, he had found a purpose beyond his wealth, a meaning that transcended material success. Looking at his son, Lucas knew that this was the true legacy he would leave behind, a legacy of love, courage, and the strength to face even the hardest trials together. The days following the surgery marked a slow but steady journey of recovery for both Lucas and Ethan. The atmosphere in the hospital room was filled with a quiet sense of victory, a fragile peace that Lucas cherished deeply. Each morning, he woke to the sight of Ethan resting, his face calm and his breathing steady, a visible reminder of the miracle that had brought them together. The pain from the surgery lingered in Lucas's body, each movement reminding him of the sacrifice he had made, but he welcomed it, seeing it as a small price to pay for his son's life. Lucas spent hours by Ethan's side, the bond between them growing stronger as they shared more conversations, laughter, and even moments of comfortable silence. He found joy in the simple interactions, whether it was holding Ethan's hand or listening to him recount stories of his school friends and dreams. These exchanges were the foundation of a life he had never known before, one built not on wealth or status but on the intimate connection of family. Ella was a constant presence, her quiet strength and unwavering dedication anchoring them all. She moved between their rooms, checking on them both, her eyes filled with gratitude and relief each time she saw Lucas and Ethan together. For years, she had shouldered the responsibility of raising Ethan alone, believing Lucas was out of their lives forever. Now, seeing the two of them united, she felt a fulfillment she hadn't thought possible, a sense that her struggles had finally led to this moment of completion. Lucas often found himself gazing at Ella with newfound admiration. Her resilience, her ability to endure hardship and maintain her dignity, had instilled in Ethan the qualities that he now treasured. There was a silent understanding between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the journey they had both taken to reach this point. She had given Ethan a strong foundation, one built on values Lucas had once lost in his pursuit of success, and he felt immense gratitude toward her for shaping their son into the person he was today. The doctors regularly visited to monitor Lucas's recovery, and though his health was delicate, he responded well to the care. They commended his resilience, reminding him of the risks he had taken to save his son. Each time they spoke of his sacrifice, Lucas would simply nod, his thoughts always drifting back to Ethan. He knew he had made the right choice, and the pain he endured was a constant reminder of the love he had come to embrace. Ethan's recovery was gradual, yet each small improvement filled Lucas and Ella with hope. They watched as he regained his strength, his laughter returning, brightening the hospital room with his lively spirit. Lucas felt a deep pride watching his son recover, the boy's resilience mirroring the strength he had inherited from his mother. Ethan was young, yet his experience had given him a maturity that few his age possessed. He seemed to understand, even without being told, the gravity of what his father had done for him, and this understanding deepened their connection. As Ethan became stronger, the doctors began discussing plans for his eventual release. The idea of leaving the hospital, of returning to a normal life with his son and Ella, filled Lucas with a sense of anticipation. He wanted to experience life beyond the walls of the hospital, to share moments with them in the world outside, free from the constraints of illness and worry. The vision of simple days together, a family finally united, was a dream that sustained him, giving him the strength to push through the remaining discomfort of his own recovery. One afternoon, as they sat together in the quiet hospital room, Ella spoke softly, breaking the silence. She expressed her gratitude, her voice thick with emotion, telling Lucas how his sacrifice had not only saved Ethan but also changed her life. She admitted that she had never expected him to return, that she had long accepted her role as Ethan's sole parent. But now, seeing the bond between them, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a gratitude that transcended words. Lucas listened, his heart swelling with appreciation for the journey they had all taken. He assured her that his actions were not just a sacrifice but a fulfillment of something he had always longed for but hadn't realized, the chance to be a father, to find meaning beyond wealth and success. His eyes met hers, and they shared a moment of understanding, the shared burden of the past giving way to a future they could now face together. When the day finally arrived for Ethan's discharge, Lucas's heart brimmed with joy. He and Ella helped Ethan prepare, gathering his belongings with a sense of excitement that felt surreal. The hospital staff, aware of their story, offered warm wishes, their smiles reflecting the impact of Lucas's sacrifice. Walking through the hospital's halls, Lucas felt the weight of the past weeks lift, replaced by a hopeful anticipation for the days to come. Back at Ella's modest home, they settled into a new rhythm, each moment imbued with a sense of normalcy and joy. Lucas found contentment in the simplest routines, sharing meals, reading with Ethan, and laughing together. The bustling sounds of daily life, the warmth of family around him, were comforts he had never appreciated in his years of luxury and solitude. Here, in this small home, he found a fulfillment that no mansion or business empire had ever given him. Ethan, too, seemed to flourish, his energy returning as he adjusted to life beyond the hospital. He would often surprise Lucas with small gestures, a drawing, a laugh, or a hug, that reinforced the bond they shared. The innocence and love in Ethan's actions reminded Lucas of the true value of family, a lesson he had learned not through wealth but through sacrifice and connection. As they settled into this new life, Lucas knew his time might still be limited, yet he no longer feared the future. He had given his son a second chance, had found love and belonging in the family he'd discovered, and he knew that whatever lay ahead, he would face it with a heart filled with peace. The legacy he had always sought was here, in these moments with Ethan and Ella, in the quiet strength of their bond. In the evenings, as they sat together, Lucas would tell Ethan stories of his past, of his journey from wealth to humility, hoping to leave him with wisdom that would last beyond his lifetime. The boy listened intently, his admiration for his father evident in his bright eyes. And as the nights passed, Lucas felt the fears and regrets of his former life melt away, replaced by a love that would endure beyond his final days. The weeks that followed were a time of healing, both physically and emotionally, for Lucas, Ethan, and Ella. The hospital's sterile walls were now a memory, replaced by the comfort and warmth of Ella's modest home, where the rhythm of daily life had settled into a peaceful cadence. Each day, Lucas found himself cherishing the small, seemingly ordinary moments that his past self would have overlooked. Morning light filtering through the curtains, the smell of coffee filling the kitchen, and Ethan's laughter ringing out as they shared breakfast, all of these moments filled Lucas with a deep sense of gratitude. Lucas's body, still recovering from the surgery, moved more slowly than before, but he accepted his limitations without regret. He had found purpose in this quieter life, surrounded by family, a fulfillment that transcended the ambitions that once drove him. Each step was a reminder of the sacrifice he had made, not out of obligation, but from a newfound love and dedication. He had lived his life accumulating wealth, yet in these final months, he had discovered a richness that no amount of money could ever buy. Ethan was thriving, his resilience and spirit shining brighter each day. He had returned to school, where he shared his stories and adventures with Lucas every afternoon. There was a maturity in the boy now, a quiet wisdom that had grown from the challenges he had faced. He seemed to understand the value of family, the preciousness of each moment they had together. Whenever he would hug Lucas, there was a gentleness, an unspoken gratitude that lingered, reminding Lucas that their bond was something both cherished deeply. In their time together, Lucas shared stories of his life, recounting tales of his younger days, the business ventures that once consumed him, and the choices he had made along the way. He wanted to pass on the lessons he had learned, to ensure Ethan understood the importance of integrity, kindness, and humility. These stories became a part of their routine, often told in the evenings by the fire, with Ella sitting nearby, listening quietly. She knew these moments were precious, each story a piece of Lucas's legacy for Ethan to carry forward. Ella, too, had found peace. Watching Lucas and Ethan together, seeing the love and bond they had formed, gave her a sense of completion. She had raised Ethan alone, shouldering the burdens of both parents, and now, seeing her son flourish under Lucas's guidance, she felt a weight lift from her heart. Her quiet strength and unwavering love had been the foundation of this family, and now, with Lucas by her side, she felt that all her sacrifices had been worth it. Lucas's health continued to decline, but he met each day with courage, determined to make the most of his remaining time. He and Ella often talked late into the night, sharing memories, dreams, and reflections on the paths their lives had taken. These conversations were filled with a quiet acceptance of what was to come, a shared understanding that they had both finally found what mattered most. For Lucas, there was no longer fear, only a sense of peace, knowing that he was leaving behind a family bound not by wealth but by love. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Lucas felt a familiar weariness settle over him, a gentle reminder of the time he had left. He looked at Ethan, who was busy drawing at the kitchen table, his face lit with concentration. Turning to Ella, he gave her a small, knowing smile, his gaze filled with a quiet resolve. They had all faced so much together, and now he was ready to let go, to entrust his legacy to the family that had transformed his final days. That night, Lucas took Ethan aside, sharing a final story, one that carried a message he hoped would stay with him forever. "Ethan," he began, his voice soft, "life is about more than what we own or achieve. It's about who we become and the people we choose to love." Ethan listened intently, his young face thoughtful, taking in his father's words with a gravity beyond his years. Lucas placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the strength in the boy that had brought them together. In that moment, he knew Ethan would carry forward everything he had hoped to leave behind. In the days that followed, Lucas's strength began to fade, and the family gathered around him, their love providing comfort in the quiet hours. He slipped away peacefully, his hand resting in Ella's, a gentle smile on his face, surrounded by the warmth and connection he had yearned for all his life. There was no grand farewell, only a serene departure, marked by the knowledge that he had finally found what he had spent his entire life seeking, a family bound by love and trust. After his passing, life in Ella's home continued with a new sense of purpose. Though they missed Lucas deeply, his presence remained with them, woven into the fabric of their lives. His influence was felt in the small things, a phrase Ethan would recall, a piece of advice he'd given, or a story he'd shared. Ethan, in particular, seemed to carry his father's spirit within him, living each day with the same kindness and integrity Lucas had come to value. Ella and Ethan often spoke of Lucas, their memories keeping his legacy alive. They celebrated his life, not through material possessions, but through the values he had imparted. Together, they created a small garden in his honor, a space filled with vibrant flowers, a symbol of the love that had blossomed despite the hardships they had endured. Each morning, they would visit the garden, tending to it with the same care and devotion Lucas had shown them in his final days. As time went on, Ethan grew, his life unfolding with the strength and wisdom he had inherited from both his parents. He carried Lucas's legacy forward, a testament to the transformative power of love and sacrifice. His father's story became a guiding force, a reminder that true wealth was found not in money or status but in the bonds we create and the lives we touch. In moments of challenge or doubt, Ethan would think of Lucas, his father's words echoing in his mind, grounding him with a sense of purpose. Through his own life, he honored his father's memory, striving to live with the same integrity and compassion Lucas had taught him. And in doing so, he ensured that Lucas's legacy lived on, not in the world of business or wealth, but in the quiet, enduring strength of a family bound by love. Thus, Lucas's journey ended not with the accumulation of riches, but with the realization of a life well lived, a legacy of love passed down through the family he had come to cherish. In every step Ethan took, every kindness he offered, Lucas's spirit continued, a reminder that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in the connections we forge and the love we leave behind. Thank you for listening. See you in the next episode. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.